So we just finished the Transformer Fan First Friday, October 16th, 2020, and they revealed a lot more than I expected this time around. We thought we were going to probably just get a little bit of the Studio Series, maybe some of the RED, but they gave us a lot of stuff here. Now, granted, some of the stuff that they showed us we've already seen, some of it through leaks, some of it through Walmart listings or the Korean Safety Board, but we'll go through all of that throughout this weekend. Today I'll post a bunch of segments and tomorrow probably a few more. But let's start with the Studio Series stuff. Now, we saw yesterday, they showed us the Hot Rod officially, and they showed us the Jazz officially. And I'll get more into the Jazz in a moment. There's a hot button topic with that one I want to address. But let's go into some of the other stuff that they showed. They pointed out that in the Transformers Studio Series numbering up to this point, they have not made it to 86 yet. So they figured they were going to jump all the way to 86 and then put sub-numbers for that one. So it's kind of cute how they do it. So like Jazz is 86-1 and Cup is 86-2 and so on. Nice little touch there with the box art. They also show us the inner box art and all the cool stuff that we already learned about from the Korean safety boards, how they're going to have these nice screenshots that have been cleaned up from the 86 movie to make backgrounds for the characters. All very topical, really cool. But let's jump into Studio Series 8603 Deluxe Blurr that they showed us. And I'll be honest with you. I'll be straight up honest with you guys. I don't know. It looks good, but considering how good Cup is, how good Hot Rod is, and some of the others, this one I'm not feeling. Maybe it's because of the extreme amount of kibble hanging off of his shoulders. Maybe it's just that it just isn't 100% to the Fluoro Deary model. I don't know. It's a lot of things that are kind of weird about it with me. I mean, I kind of really like that Titan Returns one. You know, like it's something where I really like that one, specifically the Legends one. And that one did such a good job that I'm kind of asking myself, like, why didn't they kind of pattern that a little bit? Maybe because they didn't want to have to include the shield. Maybe the shield didn't do it for them, and because that was something that wasn't used in the 86 movie, they didn't want to use that, because they clearly showed a way to engineer Blurr's hood and make it part of the transformation rather than it being something that detaches and make a shield, which has been present in a lot of Blurr toys throughout the years, whether it be third party, whether it be animated, whether it be even the Titan Return one or the original Generation 1 toy. So it's nice to see that. But at the same time, it's like, okay, you know, has his gun. His gun is based off of the Fluoro Deary design, not off of his old G1 toy, so that's a nice touch. It's cool that what I originally thought was going to be his shield from those small little pixelated images from the Korea safety board, it actually wasn't a shield, it's his welder hand, which is a nice little accessory that attaches on top of his hand to reenact the scene from the Planet Junk where he's fixing the Autobot shuttle. So, cool stuff there. But I don't know, the proportions seem off. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but the proportions seem a little off. It's that like underarm kibble that make the front of the car. I just feel that they, you know, maybe it's because of the price point and how it works and how much they had to work with in terms of budget, but I feel that there could have been a way that could have been done differently. Considering I look at the Titan Return and go, oh, you know, they kind of got it there. And even when you look at the old G1 toy, granted it was a little flat, but even they were kind of able to flatten it out and stuff. But I don't know. I'm not 100% on game with Blurr, and it's a shame because I really like Blurr as a character. You know, Casey Collar and his Spotlight Blurr made me really like that character even more than I already did. But yeah, hey, it is what it is. It is what it is. Maybe we'll get something better down the line, and this is the hiccup of it, because like Cup and Hot Rod and some of the others have been so stellar, and Jazz especially. So very interesting, the general silhouette of this one. Now let's go into another one, and it is that of Grimlock, the Leader Class. And we finally get to see a better idea of his robot mode, his alt mode, and everything like that. Now, granted, what they had on hand was only CG mock-up images. They claim that they don't have the actual final toy in person because they're still finalizing the deco, which is interesting considering what the Korean safety board has. But it is, you know, what they say, so we'll go with that. So we get to see Grimlock's alt mode. And again, like the thing is with Grimlock is that's always been one of those characters that I feel was pretty much perfect since day one, his toy. Like there really wasn't too much that had to be done to make it better. You know, his masterpieces were perfect. There was even like some other versions throughout the years that pretty much did what they needed to do. So when you have something like Studio Series, you ask yourself, well, what do you got? What are you going to do this time around? You're going to go for that Fleuro-Deary proportions, you know, screen accurate kind of look, color scheme, paint deco, and shape like that. And that leads to what we have here with this Leader Class Grimlock. Now, some people are not a fan of the proportions, but I mean, the Fleuro-Deary proportions of the cartoon, whether it be season 1 or the 86 movie, were always kind of that weird, wide, stocky kind of look. His sword is, again, still missing, but I think now that I think about it more, was his sword ever in the 86 movie? I don't think so. I mean, I don't remember him really using a gun either, but I guess they had to include some accessory. I think I would have included the sword over the gun, but I guess they wanted to go with the gun over the sword. But yeah, it's cool. I mean, I understand what they went with here. Let's talk about that Wheelie. Now, the Wheelie was the one that everyone was kind of curious about because when we saw those leaked images from Safety Korea, it was hard to see anything because he was literally like 7 pixels by 8 pixels. It now confirms that he's a non-transformable accessory piece with limited articulation and in a fixed pose. Now, even though he's in a fixed pose, which is a squatting pose, he does have limited articulation, meaning that he has ball joint articulation on his hips and his shoulders, and probably a left and right turn for his head, and that's about it. We don't know if that slingshot pops out or not. It's uncertain. But it's something that's a glorified accessory piece with some articulation on it to go on the back of Grimlock to reenact the Quintesson, pit scene more or less. So doesn't transform. Maybe down the line we'll get a better Wheelie figure, but right now he's relegated to be an accessory. And that's all that. Now, I forgot to mention that both Blurr and Grimlock also come with those background pieces. So in the case of Blurr, he's going to come with the Autobot City, assembling with Ultra Magnus scene there at the beginning of the attack on Autobot City. And of course, Grimlock's going to come with the Quintesson Pit of Judgment, the bottom of the pit, when Grimlock wants to munch metal to reenact again the Wheelie with the slingshot and all of that. And they also showed cups, which we didn't really get a good look at. And of course, it's the squid, which is kind of bizarre because most of Cup's gimmicks and stuff is above water as opposed to below water. But I guess they also want to have it that you could have like Hot Rod with his buzzsaw and Cup, with all his limbs all over the place. And you could just have him face down in that diorama instead of up above fixing him and not leaving a piece out. But yeah, that's it more or less for the new reveals. I just want to go back to the Jazz for a second. There was a lot of people contacting me on Twitter asking me my 2 cents on what's going on with Jazz and his numbering. People are saying there's different things that are kind of dubious and stuff. And I mean, I didn't know the history of this number 14. And when I asked Jaws D, I was like, what's up with this? And he didn't know either as a man of color. So it was quite news to us. But then again, you're talking to a guy who also didn't understand the old problem with Power of the Prime Jazz being a Canadian who's obsessed with hockey and poutine, I guess. But the thing is that when I looked at the number 14 Jazz, I did some research last night to go like, is there any kind of association with that character and that number? And there actually is quite a bit that dates back quite a bit, more than 10 years. And then during the Hasbro Pulse panel, they even said that Jazz has had association with that number a few times. They didn't touch up on it, but I'll bring it up here right now. The number 14 with Jazz was originally used when Takara imported the 2007 movie toys. And so Jazz Toy had the designation because everyone had like MA. So MA is for movie Autobot, and MD is movie Decepticon or movie Destron. And they went with, so MA14 was Jazz. So that was the first time in my research here that the number has been associated with that character. And then when you get to even like the long defunct Transform cell phone game, Transformer Legends, which I love the art from that by Marcelo, Jazz was an epic rare card, and that card's numbering was 14. So already there's two associations with Jazz and the number 14. Was it malevolent even back then? I don't know, but there's that association with that character. When you go from the more technical side of things, and this is me who's a big racing guy and racing culture and all of that kind of stuff, and one of my favorite movies of all time, Le Mans, Jazz in the late 70s, his alt mode was based off of the Porsche 938, I believe it was a 938 Turbo Martini Porsche. And this falls into all the other stuff that Hasbro has to deal with that's a headache in itself, which is, it's one thing that they have to deal with the aspect of making alt modes with not having to have to pay car licenses. And luckily, when you're doing show accurate alt modes based off of Fliro Deary's interpretations of a Porsche, you could actually get away with not looking like a Porsche, because Jazz's alt mode in the cartoon and how it looks is very different than the actual standard Martini Porsche 1978. I want to say it was a 78 design before the lip turbo upgrade. But anyways, I'm not going to get into the weeds of that kind of stuff that you guys don't care about. But the point is that, so they managed to make a Porsche that still kind of looks like a Porsche, but not really, that matches the show model. But to also play it safe, they're not going to use 100% the deco of that of the original Jazz Martini toy, like the old 1984 toy, which is based off of the Martini deco, and go that route. So instead of Martini's classic deco is the dark blue lines, the two light blue stripes, and then the red down the center. That's their color, and that's how it's always been for years. You put that on Jazz, you put the number 4 on it, or any of the associated numbers that they had, which was 1, 4, 41, and 69, giggity. You're going to have them knocking, going like, hey, we see what you're doing here. You're homaging one of our famous Le Mans cars from back in the day, from the 70s. We want a piece of the deal. So they're trying to avoid probably that. And not to mention, and this is almost like it kind of also nods to Exhaust. Exhaust, because, they tried to avoid the things that Exhaust did, because he was a cigarette company that was his sponsor. In the case of Martini's an alcohol company. They're a major alcohol company, so they also probably want to avoid doing an homage to an alcohol company. So they did as best they could. And when you really look at, Jazz's model in the old show, and you look at what they went with ultimately in the end, maybe the blue could have been a little darker. It's more of a light blue, but otherwise it's pretty good. And as for the numbering, I mean, that's a whole other story. That's something where there was Jazzes that were number 14 in the past. They obviously didn't want to go with the number 4, 1, 41, or 69, because those were based off of trademarks associated with that car. I mean, they could have gone with, let's say, like number 8, because that was his old Cybertron Takara 1985 number. The Cybertronians were all designated with numbers at the time, so they could have done that. But they went with 14. I don't know if it's malevolent. I don't know if it was purposeful to match what was done in the past. I don't know if it was an accident, but this is my 2 cents on that. And when you look at even some other recent Transformer toys, whether it be Earthrise Wheeljack or Earthrise Smokescreen, the same thing happened there. They wanted to avoid, homaging Lancia and getting knocked on the door and hey, you have to pay us because they changed the numbers on Wheeljack, and the same thing, they changed the numbers on Smokescreen. They didn't give him his 38 on his Earthrise one, because now it looks like a Datsun. Now it actually has the I think it was called Electronomotica or something, was the sponsor for that one, with the red and blue. So they didn't want to go with the 38. They gave him 80 instead. So I understand what's going on and the concern that people have, but there is a deeper kind of twist to all of this, and I don't know what really to make too much of it outside of what I know from the surface level. So you'd have to take that up with the deco guy at Hasbro And I gave my 2 cents, and I hope that people could take what they can away from it. But yeah, it is what it is. And we have so much more to talk about this evening. There's a lot of other great stuff, so let's jump into that.